Last year with the launch of the Z6III, I said it was the most important Nikon camera. And then I also reviewed the ZF, which I loved for its specs and retro body design. Both of those have quickly become favorites for their feature set and their price points. But what if those two had a baby? Well, this is the Z5II, and it looks to combine two of the most popular Nikon cameras and even draw from the flagships for a fraction of the cost. Let's get into it. So I'm out here in Moab for the next few days testing the Z5II, and normally I'd be home in the studio talking to you about my experience after the fact, but I'm also here with the Petapixel team, and they said I'm a coward if I don't do this on location. So here we are.
You're a very brave boy.
Thank you. So brave. So a disclaimer, this is a pre-production version of the Z5II, and we're out here with Nikon, but for those of you who have watched the channel for any length of time, you know that I'm always going to give my honest opinions about the gear I use, and I promise that this video will be no different. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I really enjoy shooting with the Z5II, and because it's a budget camera, there are some shortcomings, so I'm going to let you know about them so it can help you make a decision for yourself. Let's kick things off with the things that I am loving about this camera. Usually I mention price at the end, but I think it's important to start with it up front to set the stage for what a good value this camera is. The Z5II starts at $1699, so about $800 cheaper than the Z6III and $300 cheaper than the ZF. Now, if this camera was to have a headline, I'd say it's the Nikon ZF packaged into a Z6III body, but some notable additions to make it even more capable. It's got the 24 megapixel backside illuminated sensor that we saw on the ZF and the latest X-Speed 7 processor that we saw on the Z8, Z9, and Z6III. That'll power all the 3D tracking and autofocus, which we will be putting to a test later in the video. From a build perspective, it's nearly the same body as the Z6III, just a little bit smaller. It fits really well in the hand and has a nice deep grip. That was actually something I had issues with on the ZF. It was great for those smaller lenses, but as soon as you put one of those Nikkor lenses on it, it was a little bit harder to handle. So if that's something you care about, maybe the Z5II is a better option for you. It's also rocking the same flip screen that we had on the Z6III and the ZF. Gotta be under the tree for the best shots. And we have the flippy screen, so we don't have to get down too low. This is proper back support with flippy screen. Maybe this is a bit contentious for some, but for me personally, I am a huge fan of the flip screen for those lower and odd angle shots, and of course, because I'm often filming myself. The EVF is also much improved from the original Z5. Now, it's nowhere near as bright as the Z6III, but the Z6III was bright enough to blind you. So in practice, even out here in the harsh Utah desert sun, it was more than usable. There's also dual SD card slots, which is pretty unusual for a camera at this price point. On the other side of the camera, we have a headphone jack, a mic jack, a USB-C port, which does power delivery, and sadly, a micro HDMI port. So landscapes are fun and all, but not the best scenario to test autofocus. So we just met up with Dylan, Parker, and Riley, and we're gonna head out on the trail and really push the camera to its limits. Now, the nice thing about the Z5II is it's basically the same body as the Z6III. The only thing missing externally is that top screen. They've just kind of swapped it for the top dial. But that also means that it has all of the custom buttons. So we have their function 1 and function 2, which I like to use to customize my autofocus settings. And if you haven't watched my Nikon autofocus video guide yet, it'll be linked somewhere here or there. And from an autofocus perspective, out here doing all of this sports, I'm honestly very impressed. We have 11 frames per second mechanical shutter, and I'm sitting there bursting. These guys are riding by, the dog's running by. I mean, just looking at the back of the camera, I'm pretty sure I hit 95+% of my shots. So even though the Z6III is more for speed, if you do need to do a little bit of speed, like the Z5II is gonna be pretty dang good. While the Z6III was built as a speed demon, where the Z5 really shows its colors is in low light. All right, so we're out here in Arches doing some Astro. The Milky Way's out, it's fantastic. The clouds went away, also good. And this camera has been very impressive for Astro. So backside illuminated sensor makes it great in low light. One thing I've been very impressed with is the autofocus. So I just put it on the smallest focus box, pop it on the brightest star, hit autofocus, and it works. I don't know about you, I've never been able to do that on any camera. I'm always a manual focus, do some zoom in, just kind of twist it until it looks like a pinpoint. But this has been working great, which I'm very impressed by. And then we also added a few additional features from the higher end cameras to help with Astro as well. So we have the starlight mode, which boosts up the exposure so we can just sort of see what we're doing a little bit better. There's also an option called warm display colors, which basically takes your camera, turns it into Stranger Things upside down land. Everything turns red, which is really helpful for saving your night vision. And then there's two options for that. So one, it turns everything red. And then another option, it's all of the display is red, but then once you're viewing your image, it goes back into normal mode. I've been very impressed with the photos that we've had so far, and I think we'll have probably 1 or 2 more compositions before the sun comes up. Now, one thing that I and a lot of other people loved about the ZF was the dedicated black and white switch. While there's no black and white switch on the Z5II, there is a dedicated picture control button, which gives you not only black and white, but access to all of the picture controls, which are basically Nikon's version of film recipes. These can be customized, or you can create your own and download additional recipes from Nikon and Nikon creators. Again, if you want more info on that, I have a dedicated video, which I will link to up above. All right, we're about to start a little adventure here. Should be interesting.
We're gonna come, we're gonna have a good time.
You ready?
Yes, let's do it.
2 hours later.
What's the worst that could happen, right?
Okay, maybe it's time to shift gears a little bit here and talk about some areas where the Z5II falls a little bit short. Now again, I can't stress this enough, this is a $1,700 camera, so it will have some shortcomings, and that's totally okay. Let's start with video, because this is an area where budget-friendly cameras tend to begin to fall a little bit short. On the one hand, the Z5II has a lot to be excited about. There's 4K N-Log in 10-bit 422, and Nikon has even included and RAW. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is now the cheapest camera to do RAW internal recording. In my tests, I found the autofocus in video to be quite responsive, but there are still some shortcomings on the video side. That backside illuminated sensor is not built for speed, so the drawbacks is that there's slower readout in video and some pretty aggressive rolling shutter. And then of course there's that micro HDMI port, which isn't positioned super well to go along with that flip screen, which means it's gonna be hard to use an external monitor very effectively. There's also no downsampling to that 4K, so I'm pretty sure that there's line skipping going on. And while you do have 4K, it's only up to 24 or 30 frames per second without a crop. 4K 60 has a 1.5x crop. I also mentioned those dual SD card slots, and while you can do dual recording on the photo side, you unfortunately cannot do dual recording on the video side of things. Now that is also the case on the Z6 III, I just want to make that very clear. Again, for a $1,700 camera, I think these are pretty reasonable trade-offs, but if video is your primary focus, I think you're probably better off looking at something like the Z6 III. Another small note, I noticed a few times when we're doing these high burst shoots, the photos took a long time to write to the camera and store. Now I'll say it never actually affected the shooting process. Like it's not sitting there buffering and not allowing me to shoot. It's just after the fact when I'm sitting there waiting to review the photos that they're actually loading slowly onto the card. All in all, during our time out here in Moab, I was looking for times when the Z5II would fall short, and I kept not finding them. Is it the perfect camera? No, but is it a great option for beginner and intermediate photographers that want something to grow into that they won't grow out of anytime soon? Yes, absolutely. Heck, even Z6 III or Z8 owners, like this could be a really good B cam or even just like an Astro cam, for example. I'm personally way more impressed than I expected to be, but I am curious to hear your thoughts. So let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.